What's up, philandering Brian?
Philandering? Yeah, some news that I don't know?
He's out there cheating on us in podcast land.
I know, he didn't even mention us once.
No, and he didn't even mention us.
Oh, well, that was with my other podcast.
Yeah, and don't mention the podcast that made you popular.
No, I always mention it. I say the other podcast I do. That's what I call it. Welcome to People vs. Algorithms. I'm Brian Morrissey, joined by Troy Young and Alex Schleifer. We have a great show today.
We got a bang. It's a banger.
It's a banger. We're all wearing white t-shirts.
It's banger after banger after banger.
I'm back, which I can't even listen to the podcast when I'm not on it.
No, of course you can't, Troy. Like anybody could have told you that.
Hey, listen, one thing that you wrote in your inimitable email this week took me back, man. I got to tell you.
What, $500,000 microsites? Did I get that right? Or you probably charge more.
I mean, more actually. So I lived through both of those eras, and you compared the time of digital agencies making expensive websites, right, to the present, right, and to how it seems ridiculous now that people would have spent that much money to build, their place on the internet. What struck me is how many of these new things we had to navigate, and Alex will remember this, at what was called Video Egg when I went there and worked with Matt Sanchez, who's now the COO of Yahoo. But
I saw him yesterday. I saw a lot of Video Eggs say LM yesterdays at a party.
They got Diplo to play at their beach in Cannes.
At Yahoo, yeah.
Yeah.
But here was the thing. When we started selling this, Alex was living, so we had a video platform. There was very unsavory stuff being uploaded. They never existed before, like a distributed video platform, and we didn't know what people would put on it, right? Like,
go figure.
Yeah, there was a lot of twerking.
It's a cultural artifact of Miami.
I had to figure out how to build an ad product around it where pre-roll didn't make a lot of sense. So you have a video player and only a video player on a page. So you had to put something on top of the video player and package it in a way that made it feel new and palatable to media buyers. So at the time, nobody was selling social anything. So rather than kind of hide from it, I tried to make social a virtue in how we packaged that media. And then I had Alex try to make the brand, what was originally the Video Egg brand, it became the same media brand, to make it feel like something that consumers could hug and love and, that felt friendly.
It was the best branding in ad tech. And I'm not saying it because you guys are on my other podcast.
Well, we've mentioned this before, but what was amazing is I remember going into so many media buyers and media executives' offices and them saying, so you're going to put advertising on social? Are you insane? You can only put advertising on professional media.
That's UGC.
Well, it was UGC, right? And I didn't dare. I mean, maybe we did call it UGC at the time, but anyway, the point is the point that you made, which is a remarkable one, is that UGC is far and away now the biggest category in advertising.
Yeah, well, it doesn't even really exist. I don't think you can. I think it's time to retire.
But what was the stat though, Brian? You put it in your email this week.
Oh, well, Group M, WPP Media, they did their regular ad spending report. And they dividing these things up is ridiculous. And a lot of people seized on the idea that, because it's a stat, that more money is being advertised against on user-generated content platforms than professionally produced content platforms. And they count YouTube as, the whole thing is these dividing lines are so artificial. They're so artificial. It's just media. Media is media.
Well, I was taken back to the good old magazine days, and it's memoir month in the Troy Young household. So I'm finishing my third memoir.
Keith McNally.
Wait, are you writing them?
Let me guess your memoirs that you have. You've got Keith McNally, you've got Graydon Carter, and
Barry Diller.
Okay, yeah, Barry Diller. I've got two of the three.
So maybe the Graydon Carter one is the most annoying. The Keith McDowell one is kind of lovely about, he's had a lot of experiences and, came back from a really tragic stroke. And I think, is the most kind of honest of all of them. The Graydon Carter one feels like, a book that's written by a Condé Nast editor, which is what he, one of the things that's really remarkable in that book is it's just so different than the Hearst culture, but not just the amount of money they spent, but what they had to do to build the Vanity Fair Oscar party into the franchise it became. And just, both like kind of how smart they were about it and getting connected in Hollywood, how much money they spent, how patient they were, how the event itself was just like painstakingly orchestrated and casted, and how it's much more than just like, oh, Vanity Fair has an event called the Oscar party. Like, it's like the Met Ball is to Vogue. It's a fundamental part of the media brand.
Yeah, and they're not calling him an editor-in-chief, but basically he is their new editor, their new top editor, Mark Guiducci, is, I think, a big, from what I don't know him, but a lot of why he's in is because he's good at that part of the business. And I think that is telling.
I think his accomplishment was building, what was it called? Vogue World?
Vogue World, yeah. During the NFT thing, it was like a metaverse experience. Like, I think we've all just chosen to forget that part of the pandemic. But yeah, I think that's a big part of why, he got the job. It's a global editorial director now. And you got to manage the brand. It's actually something to plug Hearst a little bit. It's something that I'm going to be discussing with Willa Bennett and Lisa Ryan at the Hearst House at Cannes.
She's the cool editor in the building. I think she's doing a cool job with Cosmo.
Yeah, she's on a dating show. Do you know that?
No.
I mean, this is the new world of magazines. I mean, you're the steward of a brand. You're not an editor necessarily. I mean, you are, but you got to do all kinds of different things because the business has changed, which we're going to talk about this week. My voice is really deep today.
Sexy, actually. It's nice. I like it.
Yeah, it is nice. It's like, sleeping on a plane will do that for you. One note on Keith McDowell. I went to one of his restaurants, Morandi, a couple days ago, and he's got the book at the register, or at the host counter or whatever. And then when they bring you the bill, it comes with a postcard of the book.
He likes the postcards.
He's merchandising.
Part of the formula, yeah.
Everyone's in the hustle. That was my big takeaway.
Well, did you see that famous postcard? Was that his, of the three women standing naked in front of the bar at one of his restaurants?
Did he?
He wrote about it in the memoir, yeah. And then they casted models, and he's like, "What is this? No one cares. Bring me real women." So it's like a famous image.
Okay.
He's an interesting guy. He's done a lot of interesting things in his life, but he's had some ups and downs, which is fun to read about.
All right, we've got a lot to cover today. And I think that was a great intro into this, right? Because we're going to be talking about a few things. One is Apple had their WWDC, their big developer event, and they came out with, their massive advancements in AI. No, actually they didn't. They came up with their new design system. And luckily, we have a renowned designer with us. And so, and that's Alex.
It's great to be here.
Anyway, we're going to go over Apple's big developer event, but particularly their design system. I'm interested in it because I don't get it, but I think a lot of people are hating on it, and I think Alex will have a much more nuanced view of this.
Brian, I'm so over
he is the designer AI. Here.
I'm so over AI. Bring on the liquid design.
Bring on the liquid design. And then we are also going to go over what's going on at Warner Brothers Discovery. It was Alex.
Even if we don't
Alex
really
might
care,
be right,
but we're going to argue about it anyway.
Alex might be in line to run it, I think, at this point. And I want to talk about the link economy. This is something that every single publisher is dealing with belatedly, and maybe we can discuss why they didn't see the writing on the wall for this. But the end is nigh, and I think that's pretty obvious.
Sounds like a hell of an episode, Brian. I'm very excited to be part of it.
I wanted to.
Where are you exactly? Why don't we start there? Where are you?
I'm in Comoli. It is a Italian fishing village it's on the Ligurian coast. So it's near Genoa.
Is Ben Smith?
Perhaps you know them for their salami.
Yes.
World famous for their salamis and other meats. Lovely place. And I've actually been here before. Can I just say, driving in Italy is an experience. I've driven in Italy a fair bit, but you could never pull this stuff off in the United States. There are roads that are two ways, but there's not enough room for two cars, and you just have to figure it out. You just have to cooperate.
It's all about posturing. You need to show that you're ready to fly off the road if the other person doesn't move away.
Yeah, it's insanity, but I've grown comfortable with it. I've grown very comfortable with it.
I grew up in the Mediterranean. I'm used to this aggro style of driving. When I moved to California, everyone's so nice here. And the second anyone does anything to annoy you, people go into a fit of rage.
I was just in Regina, Alex, where I learned to drive, and my daughter and I jaywalked and someone gave us the finger, which seems so backward.
That's just Canadians do that.
Wow.
Yes. Yeah. But I mean, you know how to, you grew up with a donkey, didn't you?
Yes. Let's leave it at that.
Let's leave it at the donkey.
Move on.
Let's move on. One quick note. I don't know if you saw, Sam Altman came out with a blog post in which he talking about how AI is going to like revolutionize the world and et cetera, et cetera. But he had an interesting thing in there where he said, it's the time for the ideas guys, and that ideas guys were always sort of looked down upon in Silicon Valley. But now with super intelligence as a service, it is time for ideas guys to shine.
Is it idea guys or ideas guys?
I think most idea guys have multiple ideas. Alex, you're closer to this, right? Is this true?
Would you say ideas guys?
Are idea guys looked down upon?
Yes, a derogatory term. Like an idea guy is usually somebody who just can't finish, right? Well, you're just the idea guy. I was once called a figurehead.
Figurehead's a good role.
Yeah, no, I think it's usually derogatory. It's used a lot with product managers. Which is, they come up with that.
So our product guys, because we talked about product people, and he said the guy, so I'm just going to go. This is not gendered. I just have to go with it for consistencies. Are product guys better than ideas guys? Idea guys.
Thank you.
I mean, these are all terms that we've invented. Look, the only thing you need to know is that idea guy, idea person is the thing that's usually used in a derogatory term, and product person is usually used in a way to elevate someone. So like when you say, oh, this person is a real product thinker, it means that they have good ideas to build things that get built. And when you say somebody's an idea guy, it means that they're fickle and they keep changing their mind.
Yeah. I sense a backlash to this stuff because I think people object to the idea that craft is going to be subsumed. And
I mean, I think it depends where you are.
Vibe coding is the front end of this, because you're starting to see the backlash that like, oh, big deal, you vibe coded an app that you don't even know if it needs to be connected to a database, et cetera. And I don't know, I think the vibe marketing, vibe coding, everything being vibe, whatever, it's a war on craft. And
the nice one this week was vibe hacking, which I thought was good. But idea guys are big in agencies. Like Dave Lubars was an idea guy, and that was fine. But if you're an idea guy at Google, you have no status.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's why like firms like IDEO and Frog and the rest of those are often looked down on from within the walls of a tech company. Like, I mean, I saw IDEO like do the future of the ATM machine presentation like 8 times, and ATMs still suck. Like, it's just...
Yeah, but they invented your mouse, Alex.
They did, IDEO?
Mm-hmm.
Huh, I didn't know that.
Learn something new every podcast.
Yeah, but they were always talking about like reinventing the hospital room and all these kind of things that never.
Yeah,
they were always like demo stuff.
And the myth of Silicon Valley is that these are people that actually go in and disrupt stuff. A lot of times, that is true, but a lot of it is also hot air. But let's make it more factual for the audience. We're talking semantics.
Okay, let's get into the nitty gritty of of liquid glass.
Oh, do you want to start there? Yeah, it's a good place to start.
So Apple held its big developer event, and it came out with its new design system for iOS 26. This is, I believe, its biggest like design update in a decade. It adds a lot of transparency, and it seems to me to be divisive among non-designers, at least, because it doesn't seem like it's an improvement. It seems like it's a nightmare to be able to read anything. Everything's laid on top of what's in the background. And I'm trying to understand what a professional designer, how you would look at what they're trying to do here. And also within the context of doing a design system within a company with that kind of scale like Apple.
Yeah, I'll go through my critique of the design system really quickly, because I think it's maybe less interesting than kind of the broader context this is all happening under. So the design system, I don't know if folks are old enough to remember when iOS 7 launched. That was a big Johnny Ive move. Johnny Ive had taken over software and hardware design at the time, and they were going away from what was called skeuomorphism, which are things that look like wood and felt and paper, and they were going for this entirely flat design. Years on, it really became kind of the standard across applications, right? It was actually a pretty big movement, but the first version of it was an absolute disaster. I mean, they had to roll stuff back even, after the beta launched, and then it really took a few versions of iOS to become, the version we use today, which is actually...
We were delighted at the time, Alex, though, to depart from like cheesy
we were,
skeuomorphism.
Conceptually delighted that the cheesy leather-bound notebook was going away, because a lot of designers, people that were like, especially into like, Swiss design or Japanese design, were like, this looks cheesy. So this one is, I've tested it. I think it's a disaster at the moment. The whatever you can get in the beta, and it's not just a disaster because these things always have bugs and they always kind of glitch and they're always a little slower. All of that stuff's going to be ironed out. I think it is just like a usability disaster where I have struggled reading things. I struggled to figure out how mail works. I struggled to switch tabs in iOS in the browser. Like, these are like just really basic functions.
Are you serious?
Yeah, I think it's really hard to read, especially when you're outdoors. They've really messed with kind of core functionality, like moving between tabs, where you can also slide stuff. And they're doing that kind of refractive things, and they showed people, on tables with these, glass bubbles, moving them around to see how they work. It is very cool because, when you look at something through glass, there's refraction and there's distortion that happens. But when you actually, like, in practice, scrolling to something, it adds so much noise and motion that your eye keeps going there. And I am surprised that they launched this, but maybe less surprised because it feels like Apple's in a scramble that started a couple of years ago. And it started with the Vision Pro, being sold as the future of computing. This new interface is really based on the Vision Pro interface. It works really nicely in the Vision Pro, less well here. And then all the AI stuff that was announced, I think, in a hurry. And this looks like a company that is somewhat derailed and needs to kind of get back on track. And this was them saying, like, this is the event that they should have had a year ago, instead of announcing all that AI stuff and the fake Siri stuff that never materialized. And it feels like it's kind of off center a little bit, and it still feels rushed. So, and this is amidst and I can tell you, I listen and follow a lot of podcasts that are, from the spectrum of sycophantic with Apple all the way to, critical, but with a lot of love. And the reception has been broadly negative, both on the design, also on the tone, which is like, I think people are getting tired of this hyper-produced version of it. And also the fact that it was really, they did something interesting. They started to hold this WWDC, the Worldwide Developer Conference. And they started, and they're the relationship between Apple and developers is fraught, for various reasons, the lawsuits, the linking, and all that stuff. But they started the whole presentation with basically an ad for their F1 movie. They always have a little intro stuff, and it was an ad for the F1 movie. And so starting, and one of the criticisms that developers have is that Apple is all in on services and doesn't care about developers anymore. So starting with an Apple TV presentation was kind of odd. And yeah, no, I think it's a company that's searching to reground itself, get back in the hearts of developers, but at the same time fighting for everything it's fighting for. Yeah, but they seemed a little off kilter. And I am, wow, I hope they walk a lot of this stuff back that they did in this version, because I'm not looking forward to using that. And I usually am an early adopter and very excited to try all this stuff out.
So you've done design systems in these kind of large companies like Airbnb.
Yeah.
Like how hard is it to actually do something like this? Because I guess like seeing the demos, I mean, it's like I would think, wait, didn't anyone look at this and be like, you can't read anything? Like this is obviously not going to be great. So I'm just interested in like how difficult it is to come out with a system like this within that context.
Look, caveat, there's building a system for an operating system, which is a system where everything lives, is exponentially more difficult than what I did, which was just like for, a set of apps, right? But it was always, I mean, I think just like, they have their design leadership team, I had mine, and there's definitely kind of philosophy applied to that. And to me, it's always been really important to have contrast. Like I just find stuff that lack contrast in general ugly. I have a tendency of pulling this stuff back and increasing the contrast and not using a lot of like fuzzy things. But that's, that's like a design. It's like having different designers at fashion brands. It dictates the style of this thing. So stylistically, there's already a difference. But yeah, it's striking actually this time how bad this is and how much it was made to look good for a presentation. And then when I was looking at that, I was like, yeah, that looks good here. But what if the photo in the background is a different color or moving? Does that mean the bar is going to keep changing color to adjust to it? And I was like, nah, they gotta have to figure that out. And it's like, no, it does that. Like the bar with continue, like as you scroll through photos and one's bright and one's dark, the bar behind it will continuously like adjust and change color, which is really impressive, but keeps drawing your eye there and just adding so much noise. I don't know. I think somebody just fell in love with it. And I think the visual updates they did for all their AI stuff is also, I think, generally like not great. They have all these blurry, glowy gradients appearing everything. And it's just, Apple has a few people making the decisions, and maybe they made the wrong decisions, and maybe they sidelined a little bit of the accessibility folks. And look, it's Apple. They're going to have a lot of accessibility tools to make this more readable, but that's like basically losing the battle. Say like, if your eyesight isn't super great, you're going to get the ugly version of this. That's just scaled back. But I don't know. I could go on about it. It just to me shows a sign of like Apple being a little bit more off kilter, and they put up a brave face. They mentioned that like Siri isn't perfect enough for us to release it, but they didn't go through the fact that they literally showed baked demos that people in the company hadn't even seen just a year ago, and they're gonna have a lot of work to do to get back. And the thing is, like, it's all self-inflicted, but they're going to be fine. So I don't know.
Yeah, and I think the bigger question, and maybe Troy, you have an opinion on this, is whether this is, part of, we did this with Apple about like whether or not like they're going through a period of decline. I mean, the economists had compared them to Nokia, which is not a good thing at all. And a lot of that was based on AI.
It's a crazy take. It's such I think that take is so stupid, because Apple doesn't need to be. Apple released a lot of really interesting things. They're going to let developers use their like the AI models that exist on the phone. This is like great stuff. They don't even need to build the AI. They just need to do, they would need to work with OpenAI and Perplexity and do their thing. And they're still the ones that own the phone.
The economist take is kind of dumb.
It's stupid.
Listen,
like,
if there is going to be a device that's going to turn Apple into Nokia, I can't wait to see it.
Yeah. I mean, it's not going to be the IO thing. I remain. Somebody still has.
Can I give you like a different take though, Alex? I really respect your critique of the operating system, and I've not seen it. I think that if it was good, it would be good, because we spend so much time obsessing over details of the hardware, but we spend all our time interacting with the software.
Yeah, 100% agree.
And if we can come up with a design language, that feels tactile, right? That feels like it exists somewhere between software and hardware. I think that's really cool. If I can admire if I can really enjoy the, kind of interaction models that I use on my phone because I spend so much time on it, God bless. The other stuff that they put into the release, like, polls in chat or chat background or call screening or live translation, all seem to me seem to me to be things that I would like Apple to do to extend the utility of their platform in ways that doesn't aspire to kind of create super intelligence. Like, it's just useful stuff. Right?
Yeah, it's useful stuff.
And I'm totally happy to use Gemini or ChatGPT as an application model inside of my phone and not expect Siri to do that. Fuck Siri, I don't care. Like, Siri.
I mean, it's absolutely the right. It's actually the right.
Siri is never going to be ChatGPT, ever. It will never be as good.
Because they can't risk
because they're so far behind, because
it doesn't even matter, even if they weren't far behind.
They don't have the talent.
Apple cannot currently, just with their privacy, the way they take on privacy, the way they control every messaging, like ChatGPT will tell you crazy shit, right? And that OpenAI brand absorbs it. Right now, Apple's brand doesn't absorb it, and they don't need to. Like, they own the interface. The phone is here to stay. They just need to make sure that, like, the iPhone is the best way to use ChatGPT. Great. Give me a button to ChatGPT. Great. I really feel though, I think that the reason this UI looks the way it does, because it's a very, very high technical achievement. They're doing full glass rendering, is because I think that there was a mandate, and this is a little bit of a conspiracy theory, but I think there was a mandate of saying, everything looks the same. Everybody copies us. We need something that only Apple can do. And only
I don't think that's a conspiracy theory. I think that's obvious. I think totally true.
And then only Apple can do is it needs to push the boundaries graphically of what can happen. One of the most difficult things to do is to create realistic refraction of light and stuff like that. Mm-hmm. And the only way you can do it is if you control the software stack and the hardware stack. It is entirely true that it is nearly impossible to unanimously recreate this on Android devices because there's too many variables. There's too many variables, etc. Mm-hmm. So this is very much if you want a thing that only Apple can do, it is that. But also, like, I think there needs to be some change where Apple. But once again, it's also a lot of work for developers that are feeling more and more like the deal isn't fair, and it's not great. I don't know.
One other cautionary note, though, Alex, I do recall when Johnny Ive created the design system that replaced the Steve Jobs one, there was a lot of issues, and it took a little bit of time to iron it out. But it did.
They will fix the issues. They will fix the issues. I think the state of this, like, conceptually is just worse because the other one was very much like a visual system. It still kind of clearly communicated what was going to happen. There was contrast issues, etc. I don't know. Maybe I'm just like a different person. I'm more cynical, but I feel a little bit. They will fix it, but I think that they will have to scale a lot of this. Like, will have to walk back a lot of this stuff. And to me, it's not whether or not they'll fix it or not. It's just as a signal of Apple as it is today.
Okay. Let's leave it there and get on to the sad state of the media economy.
Yeah.
Two aspects of that. One is cable TV. It's two aspects that are circling the drain: cable TV and internet publishing, the artist formerly known as internet publishing. Warner Brothers Discovery is splitting up. I mean, this was sort of forecast with the rolling back of Max to HBO Max. Apparently McKinsey made quite a bit of money on that, which is nice to see. Good work by McKinsey. And now they're splitting off the cable assets. And what's interesting is I think, media is entering this bad bank phase. The banks used to always do this. They had a lot of toxic assets. They would just sort of cleave off the toxic assets into a bad bank. And they'd be like, look, the bank's fine once you take out all the toxic stuff. So we're starting to see that in cable. And this is another one that's been coming for a long time. I mean, the cable TV has been in terminal decline for a long time. I know, Troy, you are a big defender of the job that David Zaslav has done shepherding this through. Give me your take on this.
Well, let's say for the purposes of this discussion, I'm that guy. Or let's say I am that guy. I hate naivety, as you know.
Yeah, I know you do.
And I think that when the prognosticators, not unlike yourselves, sit back and talk about people in leadership positions steering terminally fucked media companies, even the great Mark Thompson, right, who had seemingly a magic touch at the New York Times, and now, is, befuddled by CNN, is what I would call it, right? I presided over a company where the cultural issues, where the business issues, where the everyday making media issues in the simple transition from print magazines to digital, whatever you want, digital media, were really overwhelming, right? And, that's, by the way, why I was, maybe why I'm reacting to the Graydon Carter book, because it just reminded me of a time that admittedly I didn't grow up with in magazines that was just like, oh my God, so staggeringly different from the realities of media today. It's not even funny. And anyway, and the people that did it well have my great admiration. But okay, so you got a guy who's sitting on top of, all of these companies because cable networks sat sort of parasitically on top of the cable bundle in a way that they all had 50% margins. Like Hearst owned A&E and all of the A&E family of media brands with Disney, and and a portion of ESPN. And it was, hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of millions of dollars, of billions of dollars of profit for years and years and years. Reliable, beautiful, uncontestable, all of that. And so that's what people kind of generally looked the other way was Zaslav, because Discovery was wildly profitable. And except that when you looked into your crystal ball in maybe late, call it 2019, 2020, 2021, you thought, oh my God, like this 1% of a year of audience decline against the cable bundle is going to accelerate. And we're going to be in real trouble. And then when it really hits, and we can't compete for programming and we can't compete for talent, and it's just that when the wind starts to blow the other way and you're leading a company, even if it's still profitable, it's very, very difficult. And in 2022, April of 2022, they consummated the deal to buy Warner Brothers from AT&T. It's just worth reminding you that I looked it up. AT&T paid $83 billion for Warner Brothers, including HBO and those assets, right? And if you factor debt in, the enterprise value was like 100 and change, 109 or something like that. So it paid $100 billion for the asset. David Zaslav was like, oh my God, if we don't do something, there's no way that Discovery is going to be a streaming company. Because crossing the chasm from cable to streaming, even if you have 15 cable channels, is really, really difficult to create the flywheel of sort of consumer engagement that's going to sustain an independent distribution mechanism direct to consumer. Really hard to do. So he's like, I better buy that thing. But I have a $20 billion company and they paid $100 for it. So he levers up, he gets it for $43 billion. He gets the company, saddles the new entity with a huge amount of debt. Okay. And, recognizing that if he didn't do that, if he didn't have HBO, if he didn't have the Warner library, if he didn't have that head start in streaming, he was done for. And what they then did is he was compensated among, there were many metrics in his comp package. One of them was obviously reducing the debt, international subscription, expansion, content quality, cost reduction. That's what the board told him to go do. He did all that, right? He brought the debt down, and then he split the company up, seeing, by the way, that it was now inevitable because NBC had just done it and just discarded their cable assets. And by the way, through all that, he witnessed the struggle at the most formidable brand they had, which was CNN, in terms of making a transition to something, post-cable, right? A global news media brand. And so it's logical that you would then say, listen, we've got the streamer to $1.4 billion in profit. It'll trade for 30 times EBITDA. We could get it to 3 billion, at which point it's worth $100 billion. Someone is going to buy this brand, this library, Warner, HBO, and all the things around it. He can separate that out. He can let cable be run by the CFO, which is really what's happening. And then, but guys, along the way, you know, we love it. We love it when Zuck makes $100 billion. We love it when the world's richest man starts a rocket company and makes billions and billions of unimaginable, you know, pots and pots of money, right? But when a lowly operator dare make $50 million, right?
A mere 50 mil.
A guy that has reconstructed
Tell it, Troy.
a dying cable
these guys.
company, a dying cable company.
Oh my
and
God.
by the way, you know,
Finally, somebody's standing up for Zaslav.
No. The rich guys that have, like, you know, the new houses own 8% of the holding company. There's lots of rich guys sitting around the table that have their stewards sitting on the board and on the compensation committee. Zaslav goes in and pulls down 50. I say more power to you, dude. You know what I mean? And you know what? If you can convince the comp committee, just a minute, Alex, if you can convince the comp committee and the board to pay you, and then you can hit those metrics, and then you take home 50 while they fly around in their private jets making billions.
Well, to be fair,
and, I don't care about the little investor. The little investor shouldn't invest.
Definitely
I don't care.
Definitely not in media stocks.
Yeah, I mean,
no financial advice on this podcast, but do not
if-
invest in media stocks.
If the board or
you
the
sound
comp
very
committee,
angry.
if the board doesn't like it, fire them. They can fire them.
Oh, they should.
And then I get in this conversation with you guys that's so shockingly naive about brand architecture. It's like, who cares?
Oh, yeah, no.
Like, go talk to Scott Galloway about that. Done.
Wow.
End of run.
Okay, yeah, I think it's interesting that you tell Brian and I that we're so happy when Zuckerberg makes billions.
I'm happy that some AI, like, it's good to be an AI guy. They're getting like 75 mil just to go work at
They're played like professional athletes.
It's great.
I don't care how much Zaslav gets paid. I think,
There should be trades. Silicon Valley should be able to trade engineers.
but we're talking about a guy who, like, I mean, you said, people who looked into their crystal ball in 2020 or whatever. The crystal ball was called a phone, and anybody with one could have seen where this was all heading, number one. Number two, I mean...
It's not about whether you could figure it out that cable was going away, my friend. It was figuring out what to do about it. That's what you've not done.
You're like, who cares? Who cares when a person that runs this media company, which is a cultural product, screws with a cultural product when he's really, really good at spreadsheets? Because that's what matters. That's how you build a 100-person company. That's how
What did he
build
screw with? He killed a rom-com that you were invested in?
No.
What?
I mean, what was the last 12 months of,
He
like...
besmirched the HBO brand.
HBO, let's make it Max. Let's pull out Max. Let's put all the Discovery craft in it. Oh, no, that doesn't work.
I want to cue up the podcast where you said it's not a bad idea to tuck HBO as the specialty brand under Max. Just let HBO be HBO underneath of a broader brand that can accommodate all the reality TV next to it. You said that, my friend.
I said that. Did I?
We got a Vanya.
Do we have a clip?
This
Is
is
there a
like
clip?
this is like Tim Russert moment.
You can't
from
wear the
Troy.
clip. I don't think I said that. If I did, then I'll look like a fool. But I mean, it's not even that. Like, I don't even care how much money that guys make. I don't understand why people can't have an asset like HBO and even the Discovery stuff, and we're still dealing with so much drama. And now all this stuff is like, all right, that they're going to split off the cable assets from the streaming assets. They're going to resplit off HBO and the other stuff. They renamed HBO. Like, the entire history of these brands.
Respectfully, what you're saying makes no sense.
Why?
Well, I don't understand what do you mean split HBO? HBO is going to be the brand for streaming.
Yeah.
They're going to take the other stuff away, right?
Yeah.
They're going to simplify it. They're going to make it a profitable company. They're going to sell it.
Right, but okay, what have the last 5 years been? Like, they're just going to undo all the stuff they did over the last 3 years.
Well, maybe.
I mean, it's like saying, like,
It's like
all right,
acquiring draft picks.
wait,
and
It's like,
capital.
no, it's like, oh, hey, anonymous
good.
banker
AB's
is
here.
here. AB is
Hey,
here.
how you doing?
Good.
You just missed Troy defending Zaslav
AB would defend Zaslav as well.
Yeah.
AB is very much
Let me finish my
money.
point. I don't care how much Zaslav gets paid. Look, I live in Silicon Valley. Money, like, it makes no sense here. Makes no sense. So 50 million sounds like very little money to me. Like for
Did
CEO
you hear
of a
that,
big.
Brian?
Yeah, it's disgusting.
However, it is. I'm sorry. It's insane. Yeah, it feels like the last 3-4 years, once again, of like the people managing HBO and all these other brands have done a bunch of bad decisions, and now they're working them back, and everybody says, yeah, that is the right call. Yes, of course. Cable was dwindling, separate that. HBO is a premium brand, separate that, sell that separately. But that's what they could have done 3-4 years ago, no? Am I dumb?
Yes. No, you're not dumb.
Brian.
From a pure, so I mean,
Yeah.
just,
Okay, but hold up.
AB's
Hold up, AB.
AB's got it.
Wait, AB's going to
He's
bring
more
some
interesting.
spreadsheet energy. Let him.
Yeah, that's pretty.
I was just gonna say this is like this is like me being a nerd on tax, but there is specificity, like you, and I don't know specific to your question on the timing, but sometimes when you do mergers and other transactions, you have to wait a certain duration to then have a tax-free split or spin. So from a pure timing perspective, could they have done it earlier? Maybe not, because there's IRS rules about how long you have to wait to do a second transaction after the first one.
I mean, you could have waited and not done all the HBO Max turning into Max, merging the things, unmerging them, all that type of stuff feels like that's a waste of money and brand equity. I'm just scoring him. Troy's giving him an A+ with a little kiss and a heart next to it. And I'm just saying that was a pretty D- CEO.
I think that, I mean, the way that I would grade him is that who are you comparing him against, right? I don't know if anyone else, like the problem with this business and a lot of these other traditional media companies is the headwinds that they're facing. I think the biggest one is the decline in cable, like households that subscribe to cable, right? So it's, 7 years ago, it was 105 million households, and now it's down to 55. And even though this was predicted by research, no one thought that would happen. And when you are getting paid,
Wait, define no one.
Yeah, how does that happen? No one knows what would happen. It's just like, well, the river is the waterfall's getting
tiny.
louder.
It's obvious.
The waterfall's getting louder and louder and louder, but we're still only going 3 miles an hour. So we're not going to fall off the water. Like it's insane. It's the same thing happening with AI. When we talked to Neil Vogel, he's like, no, search is here to. I mean, he didn't really.
And here's where I would push back is like, there's a couple things that happened that were out of his control. This is probably why he had to pay McKinsey so much money. But you had your two
fireable offense. Hire McKinsey, you're immediately not allowed to be a CEO anymore. That is the
They probably went to boarding school together. But basically, what happened is, as your subscribers drop, your advertising revenue goes down, and then the most amazing fee for these cable networks are the affiliate fees. That goes down too because you're getting paid on a per sub basis. At the same time, you have COVID and the writers' strike. And so you basically have the worst of two things: revenues coming down at a very rapid rate that you can't control, and at the same time your costs are going up. And so the problem and the reason why this had to happen is really predicated on the leverage, right? So as part of this split or spin, they're basically adjusting the leverage of the two companies. So the traditional business has about 4 times leverage, and that's going to be run for cash flow. And the growth business is levered at 2.6 times, and that has a lot more room to invest and continue to grow. The other problem, so I think the hope was, people talk about cord shaving, cord cutting, and there was this belief, and I get the branding sucked, whatever, but the problem is the way that consumers engage with streaming services is much different. The ability to cancel, especially with all these new rules about opting out of things having to be basically frictionless, is your ability to turn on and off streaming services is so much easier than in the traditional cable model, where you had to sign up for a year or two and you never canceled. Whereas I think everybody on this podcast and everyone listening has canceled multiple streaming services multiple times when they just don't use them. And that was never the case before. And you're having to pay so much money to acquire the consumer, whereas before these companies never had to do that. The only part of the value chain that they worried about was having quality content and talking to Comcast every 3 years to get their affiliate
Well, this
fees.
is something Andrew Rosen has brought this up from Parkour about, and I think it's like, it makes sense with what we're going to talk about next, but like being in the wholesale business is different than being in the retail business. And like trying to like go from being a wholesaler to a retailer is difficult. And the people running them, maybe like that they're wholesalers. I mean, that was his point about the people running a lot of the cable networks, including David Zaslav. They're wholesalers. They don't know the retail business.
Yeah, Brian, do you mind if I try to make an elegant transition to your segment that I'm really looking forward to? And thank you, AB. Your presence
Wonderful.
here is very welcome. And Alex seemed to be able to swallow your pill better than the one that I provided. The reason I got thinking about this notion of Netflix and the streamers, Brian, was listening to a great podcast by Peter Kafka. His guest was Scott Frank, who's a reputable creator of entertainment, Out of Sight, The Queen's Gambit, most recently on Netflix, Department Q. And they talked about how enviable a position Netflix was in because of all the things they did. Because they got out in front first, because they built their library, because they licensed other people's content until they could rely on their own. They built a service that consumers, went to, in search of entertainment. And they, were good at customer acquisition on all those things. And it just made me realize that the flywheel, which is real engagement, not relying on other people's platforms, against a proposition that you can monetize by subs or advertising or whatever, is really hard to do now. It's really old fashioned, and it's what it takes to build a sustainable media business. Otherwise you're sort of parasitically sitting on top of a platform, and, it's fine if you don't have a cost structure and all of that. But in streaming, the flywheel is something that will be achieved by few. And a big part of that to me, and thinking about that is the death of the link economy. And Alex wrote about it in the chat, and I just thought it was a great point that he made, that a lot of companies, Meta in particular, and I guess X after that, have been hostile to the link, and Google is now the newest company that's becoming increasingly hostile to the link. And without the link, you don't have that distribution economy that we know.
Yeah. And the link has always been fundamental to the open web, right? I mean, it's basically how Google originally gave credit and figured out what they should put in front of people. And links were the currency. I mean, not including a link to someone else, if you had referenced them, it was some kind of, cultural sin. And yeah, I mean, the tech platforms started this. I mean, I think Instagram really started the war on links. The fact that link in bio even exists and is actually a big business is kind of telling.
I mean,
that.
my thesis is that all of these companies saw the link as a necessary evil, and everyone that could, Instagram with a link in bio, Apple not letting you link out to third-party payment system, Google showing you the weather when you are, anything that it could so you don't click on the link. If you actually asked anyone in these companies, nobody loved the links. The only person, it started with Yahoo. Yahoo was just a series of links and really loved the link. But after that, every single company that came out of there, saw it as a necessary evil and that they would kind of work away from as quickly as possible.
Well, Google was keeping the link alive. I mean, search is a collection of links at the end of the day.
Because they could trick you into thinking an ad was one of the links. Yeah.
Needless to say. So one of the things, let's talk about the AI tolling real quick, because this is part of the link economy. Because all my conversations that I'm having with publishers come down to how are they going to get paid for their content that is being used in these AI engines, and there has to be a tax. There's this idea of Cloudflare that's basically going to turn off, which is a CDN. They're going to turn off by default, basically tax all the bots. Humans don't get taxed, but the bots get taxed. Tollbit is trying to do this. There's lots of different people who are trying to get in on this basic concept of tax the bots.
Yep. So think about two things. One is we did some work. A few different countries tried to force Google and others to pay this link tax, which was effectively the publishers getting value from Google and I think Facebook for linking and showing their content, but not pushing people off the website. The reason why Google was like, no, is like, the point they were making is like, we don't make any money off these like news and content searches. Most of where Google's money is made is on like a very small percentage of the search volume that's like high intent. And so what's interesting when you go down this path of like licensing content, it actually opens up a couple interesting things that most people don't talk about, but that's really relevant. So the first one is the content's not that valuable. So even if you get these AI engines to pay, the difference between getting that traffic to your website and monetizing it through direct or programmatic advertising and then selling and all this other stuff is way different. It's not like 50% different. It's like 10 to 1.
Yeah.
The second thing is, as soon as you start negotiating as a group, you have to go and get antitrust. You basically have to get an exclusion from Congress, from the government, one of the houses, to basically allow you to negotiate as a group, because you cannot collectively negotiate some sort of fee arrangement from one party versus a collective group. As soon as you do that, there's a lot more constituents that own IP that publishers misperceive that have a lot more money. So we tried to do this, and the National Association of Broadcasters said no. And the reason why they were worried about it is they were worried that the way that their affiliate and retrans is structured would then get broken up because of this basically pause. And so that's like another tough hurdle. If you don't negotiate as a group, these AI engines will effectively just go, and this is what happened when Google partnered with the publishers. They just go and pick off the top 5 people and basically say, fuck you to the rest, because you don't need that like, it's like, if you want our users to see the Wichita newspaper, like, you basically have to give it to us for free. So those two things alone, I get this tolling idea, but to me, the deeper that you dive into the value sharing, it's a really tough thing. It's an interesting concept, but it's really tough to apply. I get it. They're trying to bridge some way to basically get value from these bots, but I don't think it's going to actually lead to a revenue offset that's going to help publishers.
Am I silly in thinking that the music industry does this quite successfully?
Yeah, they do it exceptionally well. Yep.
And why is that unavailable?
Because it's an oligopoly, and because the songs play on repeat. It's a different business.
And the value. So the simplest thing when we were working on this link idea is we went to those companies and they were all open to basically moderating the rights for publishers. Mm-hmm. The problem is the value of music is a lot different than printed content. So they can charge.
And media expires, music is catalog. 3 parties can negotiate the entire industry. The value of a play is easier to calibrate against and create a revenue stream. It's just a different deal.
The thing I don't get, because the protection even for the larger companies, because last time we had Neil Fogel, he was talking about how, people love the Raspberry Pi recipe from a specific outlet, for example, so they will always go there. And you would think that maybe if they strike a deal for one of their cooking sites, then they're safe. But what's happening with AI is like, I can tell it doesn't even need to scrape something from another site, because all of that, because of the way the internet is, all of that information, whether it's a New York Times article or whatever, is all clipped and reshared everywhere else, right? Mm-hmm. Like that information is all available. I can tell it, write me an article like X, or, and it doesn't even matter.
This is not to push back on Neil, but the funny thing with recipes is it's not IP. Like you can't patent it's not protected. It's the one piece of content that's not protected.
And I could say like, make me the spaghetti, but in a Matty Matheson style, and it'll figure it out. It'll do it. Somebody's done it, or there's enough out there. So.
Yeah, a lot of the people I talk to are looking at, the citations and how, if you can figure out who has been used in order, like that needs to be taxed. And also the people who are building apps on top of these LLMs, that those are the ones who are going to have to pay these taxes.
Mm-hmm.
At least that's the
Yeah, but
that's the hope that I
the
hear.
problem is there's not enough value in this whole tax regime. It's like the Trump tariff. It just doesn't make, there's not enough like juice in the system to make it work. Basically, the way to bifurcate the content is you have like normal consumer news, whatever, entertainment, and then the service journalism. The news and stuff, I think the brands that like maybe they can charge a little bit more to the AI engines as a toll, but the longer tail, they're just going to be playing for scraps. Service journalism, there's a reason to get a link to the next step in the transaction, where it's like if you're rating credit cards or something, then you want to basically stipulate to whatever LLM is pulling that data that you have to include our link so that they can get the next couple steps of the consumer journey and monetize it. But I think it's a really tough thing. I just think it's important to understand like the basic levers here, because I don't think the tolling will actually work.
Troy, what do you think?
I think that a huge swath of it is service related and is already eaten. I think a lot of it is repeated and commoditized. I think news has a dimension like it actually has on the internet to this point, where people that don't really care about who provides the information can aggregate it, and it's a low value customer and a low value news transaction, but people that really care about news will seek out premium reporting from people that charge them for it. So I think that reporting, analysis, point of view in the news will still be protected from AI aggregation. But the way that sort of gets delivered to a lot of people that don't care as much will be totally commoditized and will be largely free, to AB's point. And I think that companies like Tollbit and what was the name of the other one, Brian, that you cite, Prorata, and potentially infrastructure providers like who's trying to do it at sort of the Cloudflare's trying to do it. I think that it will both be extremely difficult and amount to small amounts of money, certainly not enough to produce meaningful content.
The place where Tollbit can make money is more on proprietary data that isn't like news or entertainment, but it's like medical stuff or other things like a journal, like education journals or some things like that, where there's only one piece of that content. And if it wants to be like, that's where the Tollbit business should go, not trying to fix the New York Times business. So I got to hop, guys. Sorry.
Thank you, AB.
Good drop by.
Thank you.
Okay, bye.
I think that's a great point, because I think there's going to be a class of publishers who aren't publishing to like actually public websites, that they'll wholesale to different engines and different, specialized apps that are we haven't even seen all of the apps that are going to be built off of these LLMs, right? Like we haven't. Like, and so I don't think it's really clear about like how much value is necessarily going to be created and who will end up paying. But I know that the idea of getting people to come to a web page to show them ads from programmatic is a losing strategy. I don't think now, Neil had said it to me. The Wall Street Journal had an article about the search declines. They called it AI Armageddon this year. And it's kind of common to be preparing for Google Zero now, and to just so assume that you're not going to get that traffic from Google, which is going to be really painful for a lot of people.
Oh, it's existential, isn't it?
AB is real busy. I was glad he could come by. He's working on a deal right now, and I'm hopeful that he gets it over the line.
I hope so too.
Well, somebody has to buy HBO.
By the way, we're having a live PVA. Are you coming to it, Troy?
I'll tell you in 2 days.
Oh my God. There's invitations and stuff.
Yeah, well, you can hold it down. By the way, Neil's got a lot to say. There's going to be no shortage of, between Neil, Sarah Fisher, and yourself, there's not a lot of bandwidth left, to be honest.
And I teased a possible surprise guest. I don't know who that's going to be. Okay.
I went to a movie yesterday. The Phoenician
People still
Scheme.
do that?
Yeah.
Okay.
One of the great things about a movie, actually a tremendously good product, is popcorn and a real Coke, not a Diet Coke, like a full-on large with ice in it, counteracting the saltiness of the popcorn. That kind of
Yeah.
that is to me.
They counteract that, but they all combine together to go at your arteries.
Is it bad for you? I guess it probably is. I felt like I had a sugar hangover this morning. Maybe that's what made me a little cranky earlier.
Yeah, I mean, that's why he wanted to protect Zaslav. It was like that scene in a movie where the nerd gets bullied and the cool kid comes up and just like stands up for him. I think that was like, heroic music playing in the background as you did that, Troy. And I think it's God's work you're doing.
Thank
it
you.
really is.
Thank you.
It's good.
Yeah.
Brian, this struck me yesterday, and you're a little like this, I would say, as a great compliment to you, but
Oh, good.
no one's been doing podcasting longer than Peter Kafka. He used to be like you, a little bit more cynical, a little bit more confrontational. Now I think he is not only an expert, but a great conversationalist. And I listened to his pod yesterday with Scott Frank, as I mentioned, and enjoyed it immensely. I think that Peter's podcast, which is called
Channels,
is a good product, and Peter is a terrific podcaster.
I don't like the name.
Channels.
I always forget what it's called.
Yeah.
It's odd.
No, but
yeah, I like this
I
stuff.
like his stuff. And you would maybe contrast him with someone like Taylor Lorenz that just like is irritating.
They're different lanes.
Yeah.
I mean, Taylor's lane is to get people mad.
Taylor has a place in the ecosystem for sure, yeah. But that doesn't mean I can, I enjoy listening to it.
Yeah. By the way, did you see that friend of PVA, Emily Sundberg, was brought out to, as part of like Apple's WWDC, like they brought out a couple of like Substackers, and this guy Oren John, I met him. I had dinner with him once. He's like the internet's creative director. He's an influencer. He's a good guy.
Emily has done an amazing job of building a brand around, like a really good product, a product that feels like it's its own thing. It's sexy. It's insidery. It always.
But then she started fighting with Puck.
Well, Puck wanted
It's just
to
like a
hire
real
her.
little. It's a real like media spat. Yeah, because
your bundling thing when you asked Semaphore Ben about why he's not hiring more, established Substackers. What John Kelly would like to do over at Puck is, pick off the best of them, people like yourself in your beat and someone like Emily, and bundle inside of Puck. Emily doesn't need to do it though. She's got a good thing going.
Yeah, the bundle. Someday. All right, let's leave it there. I'm a little out of gas. I just flew in today.
You know what is surprisingly, an airport that I actually like is Denver. I know that's not maybe a popular opinion.
Oh,
but,
you know that there's like big conspiracy theories about that.
And the new Newark Terminal C, is that what it is? The new United Terminal at Newark is pretty good. LaGuardia, also very good now.
Great.
I love all airports equally. They're all great.
You know what the best airport experience I ever had was, Alex? Is that
Singapore.
No, well, I not that. It's the Turkish Airlines food bazaar in the airport in Istanbul. They have an open grill. They have meats. They have all of it. It's terrific.
They have a hell of an airport in Istanbul. I've been in that. I wrote a newsletter in the Istanbul airport on my phone.
Well, I guess that covers our good product for the week.
Airports.
We told you guys this was going to be a great episode.
All right.
All right.
It's a work in progress.
That's it for this episode of People vs. Algorithms, where each week we uncover patterns shaping media, culture, and technology. Big thanks, as always, to our producer, Vanya Arsenov. She always makes us a little clearer and more understandable, and we appreciate her very, very much. If you're enjoying these conversations, we'd love for you to leave us a review. It helps us get the word out and keeps our community growing. Remember, you can find People vs. Algorithms on Apple Podcasts, on Spotify, and now on YouTube. Thanks for listening, and we'll see you again next week.
Let's leave it there.
Thank you, guys. Great to see you.
Great to see you too.
Good to see you all.